I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and when I told her that my apricots were just about ready for picking, she got really excited, and she told me she had never tasted a fresh apricot in her life. And this was a woman in her 80s. But I mean, that's fairly common, isn't it? Apricots are hard to find in the store, and then when you do, they're either completely tasteless or they're mushy and mealy and just not very appetizing. Or if you buy canned apricots from the store, again, in my opinion, they taste like nothing and they just kind of fall apart. So that taste of a fresh picked apricot is something really special and kind of elusive, and it takes a little trial and error to figure out exactly the right time to pick to get that perfect flavor. So in this video, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to show you how to time your apricot harvest just right. So this is my apricot tree. It's huge. This tree is, believe it or not, only about 5 years old, and this is with me pruning it pretty aggressively every spring, and this is how huge it is. But thankfully, the crop of apricots that's on it right now is suitably large, and I'm really excited about that. But this variety is called Golden Sweet. And I chose it specifically because it's both late blooming and early fruiting. So apricots are typically ready for picking most often in June and July, but it could be as late as August or as early as May, depending on your climate, depending on the cultivar you choose and all of that. So this is a late blooming apricot, which means I avoid some problems with late frosts, which is a really common issue with actually getting apricot trees to fruit. But it's early fruiting so that I beat the worst heat of the summer, so that I don't have to stress about keeping it watered so that the fruit doesn't fall and the fruit's getting sunburned, right? So it's not the hottest part of the year yet. So I love that perfect window for my climate of late blooming and early harvesting. So there are so many varieties of apricots that you can choose from, and I have a lot of resources on the Fruit Grove blog to help you choose the right variety for your climate and your situation. So I'll be sure to link to those articles in the description. But generally, apricots they're ready at basically the same time. You might have about a week or two at most where you're picking apricots, but generally they're going to be harvested in one big chunk. And so that is this week for me. So let's talk about what a ripe apricot looks like and the kind of things that you're looking for when it comes to choosing when to harvest. So the first thing you want to look for is the color. So apricots begin their lives green, of course, like just about every other fruit. But then as they get closer to ripening, they turn slowly from green to yellow gold. There's not a lot of variation in color with different apricot varieties. Most of them, I mean, they might range slightly more yellow to a little bit more on the orangey side. You might see some pink or red blushing if they have a little more direct sun exposure, but generally they all fall into that yellow, orange, gold category. So what you want to look for is that all traces or hints of green are gone. Any little bit of green, I don't know if you can see this one behind me, has a little yellow-green tinge still, even as it's slowly becoming more golden. And if you were to pick an apricot that green, not only, of course, would it not be as sweet, but it would have that sort of vegetal green taste to it. So you want to look, and I'll show you a little bit closer with one of these apricots, that there is zero trace of green left, especially if you look really close to the stem where it connects to the tree. The next thing to pay attention to is size. So I've noticed that just in these last couple weeks, as I've started to see that slow turn to gold, the apricots have started to swell in size, especially these last few days as they're approaching being fully ripe. They really do increase in size. They just sort of look more plump and juicy, which is of course what you want. So watch for that swelling, that little increasing in size. And then you also want to look at the skin. The skin itself, it should be so when it's underripe, it's a little shinier and smoother. But as it ripens, it gets this soft, almost velvety texture. It's not nearly as fuzzy as a peach, but there's this slight bit of texture to it, this softness. But at the same time, it should be nice and smooth, pretty much wrinkle-free. I mean, there might be little blemishes just from little insect bites or things like that. Most of those sort of skin imperfections are just superficial and won't affect the taste of the apricot. But when you're picking, I do discard any that have any strong discolorations, or you can tell there's a spot that's rotten or has really been chewed heavily by an animal. I go ahead and get rid of those. But look for that nice, smooth, almost velvety skin. The next most important thing to check for after color is, what does the apricot feel like? So if you find one on your tree that looks like all of the green is gone, give it a very gentle squeeze. And I find that the best time to pick is when the apricot gives just ever so slightly when you squeeze it. Very gentle squeeze, you don't want to squeeze too hard, obviously. So I don't like it when I pick them too soft, because they go from soft to mealy very fast and they just don't last at all. And so obviously if you feel a softer apricot, pick it, eat it right away, enjoy it. But for just the best window of opportunity of flavor, but also lasting more than, half a day, pick it when it's just barely giving as you squeeze. If it's too hard, if it's not giving at all, I would wait. You might even want to check back later that same day or at the latest the next morning, but it might need just a little bit longer. So wait for that perfect level of softness. Now I'm sitting down underneath my apricot tree because it's nice and shady and cool. It's basically like a big umbrella. So the last thing that you want to check is how easily does it come off the tree. So this apricot that I pulled is, like I mentioned, it has just the tiniest bit of softness, but it's still pretty firm. So I might have waited before picking this, except that when I gave it just a little twist, it came right off the tree. So that tells me it might be closer than I think it is. But really the only way to know is to just break it open and give it a taste. So we'll see, how juicy it is, how concentrated the flavor is. The good thing is, if I were to pick all of these apricots and they all had this just very, very slight bit of softness, but were still on the firm side, they would continue to soften as they sat out on the counter over the next couple of days. And that will help them to get more juicier and get that texture. So if I'm happy with the flavor, I might go ahead and do just that. Otherwise, I might wait even just until this evening before picking the rest of these, because they'll get just that much softer and sweeter. So let's crack this one open and see what it tastes like. Ooh, I gotta say, it looks pretty good. It's still a little firm, but you can see how juicy it's gonna be. Oh, come on. Okay, I take back what I said. Now is the time. I wanna pick these before the squirrels get them. That tastes so amazing. And by picking them now, they're gonna last me a few more days than if I waited until they were really soft to pick. But the taste is perfect. This is gonna be good. When it comes to the actual picking, it's very simple. There's no need to use any pruning shears or anything like that. Just grab it, twist it off. It should come off really easily. And as you're picking, I would keep your apricots in more or less a single layer. So use a shallow basket or box or something, because they can bruise really easily, especially if you're picking them on the softer side. And that's another advantage to picking them when they're a little soft, but still somewhat firm, like these apricots that I just picked here. And the flavor is still there, but it keeps them from getting as damaged and as bruised as you're handling them. Once you get them inside, lay the ones that are still a little firm out on the counter for a day or so until they're as soft as you like them, then get them in the fridge. They still won't last super long in the fridge, but that will slow them down from getting overly soft. But in my opinion, the refrigerated ones never taste quite as good as the ones that are fresh and that have stayed at room temperature. So just keep that in mind. Now, as far as what do you do about birds and squirrels and things like that, there's only so much you can do. If your tree is small enough, not so much like mine, you can use bird netting over the whole thing to protect the tree. But you can also use mesh fruit bags that you can get really simply on Amazon. I'll link to the ones that I use, where you actually tie up the individual fruits as they ripen. As long as your tree is not too big, that would be kind of pointless in my big tree. And thankfully, I found, and I think this year my harvest is big enough that I can afford to share a little fruit with the birds and the squirrels. And in fact, I just saw a couple squirrels running away from the tree with some apricots, but I think it was the ones that I left on the ground that had already fallen off the tree. So, you know, there's a case for not cleaning up around your tree immediately, so that way you're sharing with the wildlife. I'm going to do a couple more apricot videos coming up, a little series, including one about my harvest where I'm going to have a little giveaway, so stay tuned for that. As well as just, you know, what I'm going to do with all of these apricots. I mean, we can eat a lot of apricots in my family, especially ones that taste as amazing as these, but there's only so many you can eat before they go bad. So I'm going to have to do some freezing and preserving and baking of all sorts of tasty things. Let me know in the comments, what are your favorite things to do with fresh apricots, whether they're from a tree or from the store. I'm starting to narrow down what I plan to do with all of my own apricots here. I've got just a few to choose from. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.